Hey guys, tonight we slip past Golden Gates and into a room so drenched in perfume and politics, you can barely breathe without stepping on someone's ambition. The wallpaper is silk, the ceiling frescoed, the air thick with rosewater and unspoken. Tension. This is Marie Antoinette's bedroom. You're standing just inside the threshold, but don't get too comfortable. You probably won't survive this. The curtains flutter with a faint breeze, the scent of jasmine mingling with powdered wigs and expensive paranoia. There's a mirror above the fireplace, not to reflect beauty, but to remind you you're always being watched. This isn't just a bedroom. This is a battlefield in brocade. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you're joining from your bed tonight, drop your location and your local time in the comments. Let's see who's listening across centuries. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. You trudge deeper into the Queen's chamber, but every step feels like a negotiation. You're not just stepping on polished floorboards, you're treading over ambitions, crushed beneath Louboutin heels and royal slippers. By the time you reach the damask bed with its embroidered headboard and velvet hangings, you've passed through a thicket of unspoken rules, jealous glances, and the most dangerous element in 18th century France, proximity. See, Marie Antoinette's bedroom wasn't a room. It was Versailles' answer to a nuclear reactor equal parts radiant and radioactive. Every morning, dozens of nobles squeezed into this chamber to watch the Queen wake up, dress, and sip her watered-down chocolate, not out of admiration, but because in this padded pastel-colored lion's den, access was currency, and being seen holding the royal nightgown could land your family a dukedom or a death sentence. There's a heavy irony here because Marie hated it. She didn't ask to be France's teenage influencer, but her body, her hair, her womb, her smile became public property the moment she crossed the border from Austria. She was married off at 14, expected to produce a son by 16, and perform her femininity like it was an opera, which, at Versailles, it kind of was. Every powder puff had an audience. Every yawn had a whisper behind it. And her bedroom, with its gold leaf furniture and terrifyingly plump upholstery, was the stage where it all went down. But don't mistake softness for safety. The Queen's bed wasn't for sleeping. It was for performing loyalty tests. It was where you, if you were lucky, might be summoned to offer gossip disguised as compliments, or hand her a rose while hinting at your cousin's treason. The room smelled sweet, but it was sugar layered over rot. And if you listened closely, beneath the rustle of skirts and the clink of porcelain cups, you could hear the soft scratching of ambition like rats behind the walls, chewing through silk. You imagine it now. Early morning. The doors fling open. You're elbowed aside by a duchess who smells like lavender and entitlement. Ladies in waiting rush forward, arguing over who gets to pass the chemise to Her Majesty. And then she appears, Marie Antoinette, barely 5 feet tall, pale, sleepy, but already perfect. Her hair's been slept on like a crushed souffle, but within minutes, it'll tower a foot high, powdered like a ghost, and laced with miniatures of sailing ships or gardens, depending on the political weather. You can't look away. Nobody can. Because this is Versailles, and watching the Queen get dressed is your one shot at survival. But survival's tricky when everyone else wants the same thing. And in a room so small, and so full of lace and resentment, alliances shift faster than fashion trends. One day, you're whispering in her ear. The next, you're banned to the countryside. Your name dragged through pamphlets filled with doggerel and very aggressive metaphors involving milkmaids. The bedroom becomes a trap. Not for the Queen, for everyone else. And eventually, for her. 2. Historians still argue whether Marie understood the full weight of what her bedroom had become. Was she naive, just a girl trying to play pretend in a poisoned dollhouse? Or was she perfectly aware, using every morning robe and sidelong glance as a lever of control, a way to hold power when the throne itself was slipping from her hands? What we do know is this: her bedroom wasn't just furniture and fabric. It was a theater of survival. And it didn't just host courtiers. It produced revolutions. And sex. Oh, there was sex. But not always the kind you think. According to Eleanor Herman's Sex with Kings, the Queen's bedroom was ground zero for courtly affairs, not hers, necessarily, but everyone else's. Affairs that were half political merger, half French kiss. There's a particularly spicy story of the Comtesse de Polignac, Marie's bestie, and possibly more, using late-night hair-braiding sessions to pass letters between factions. And while scholars debate the nature of their closeness, one thing's certain: if gossip could kill, Versailles would be a mass grave. Still, even in all this velvet espionage, weirdness found a way. Like the Marquis de Sade being banned from court, not for his ahem recreational violence, but for writing plays that made Marie look bad in drag. Or the Queen's personal perfumer, who insisted her night pillows be misted with orange blossom and the sweat of young dairymaids. The line between creepy and ceremonial was ... porous ... And so, as you lie there tonight, picturing this opulent little room of secrets and silk, remember, not all wars are fought with swords. Some are fought with hairpins, blush, and brutal proximity. And this, dear listener, is only the beginning. You wake before the sun, not because you want to, but because the court demands it. You're already sweating, even though the room is cold. The kind of chill that sits in the bones of old castles and people who know they're about to compete for relevance. As the faint golden light creeps into the Queen's bedroom, the crowd outside thickens. Yes, a crowd in her bedroom, to watch her wake up. Because in Versailles, Marie Antoinette's toilette, the sacred ritual of brushing her hair and buttoning her bodice, was less about cleanliness and more about hierarchy. You aren't here to serve, you're here to be seen. This isn't a wake-up call, it's an audition. If you're holding the wrong hand towel at the wrong moment, you might find your family estate reassigned to someone with better timing. And here's where it gets twisted. The Queen doesn't even get to decide who dresses her. That privilege belongs to a tiered system of noblewomen, ranked like some deranged skincare pyramid. If you're higher in rank, you get to hand her the shift. Lower rank? Sorry, step aside. Even if you're already holding it. There's a documented moment where the Queen stood half naked for several long, awkward minutes because a duchess walked in mid-toilette, outranked the current assistant, and everyone had to wait while the linen changed hands like it was a holy relic. It's absurd, unless you're French nobility, in which case it's deadly serious. The Queen's body becomes a chessboard. Every sock, every garter, a piece to be maneuvered. Historians still argue whether these rituals were meant to elevate the monarchy or humiliate it. Some say the elaborate dressing ceremonies were displays of divine right, a live-action painting of grace. Others believe they were engineered traps, designed to bind the royals in protocol so tight they couldn't breathe without permission. Either way, for Marie, it was suffocating. She once tried to speed up the morning routine by dressing herself like some sort of radical peasant with independent arms, and the backlash was instant. It was seen as not just a breach of etiquette, but an insult to the entire French aristocracy. Proof she didn't understand her role as both sovereign and sacred doll. And dolls don't complain. Dolls just sit there, powdered and still, while politics unfold around them. There's a scent in the room now, something darker than perfume, sharper than powdered lilac. It's the musk of desire laced with danger, the kind of smell that makes people lean in too close and say things they'll later pretend to forget. Because this isn't just Versailles. This is the Queen's inner sanctum after hours. The lights are low, the day's gossip is still warm in the walls, and the game has changed. You're no longer jostling for towel privileges. Now you're part of the after party, where the stakes are stripped of protocol and covered in silk. This is where flirtation becomes negotiation, and secrets change hands not in scrolls, but in size. And you're about to learn why Marie Antoinette's boudoir was less a sanctuary and more a diplomatic strip club with better wigs. People didn't just gather here to serve the queen. They came to seduce power itself. Not with brute force or armies, but with perfume, proximity, and well-timed touches. Sex wasn't the point. It was the currency. You lean against the wall, trying to look invisible as the Comtesse de Pilastrin glides past, trailing a scent that could kill a man at 50 paces. She smiles at a marquis whose fingers linger too long on the edge of her sleeve. They're not talking politics, but they are. Every look is a signal. Every laugh is a chess move. The queen watches from her chaise, her eyes half-lidded, pretending to be too tired to notice, which of course means she sees everything. A flick of her fan could freeze a room. A sip of her wine could launch a scandal. According to the history of sexuality, these moments weren't side effects of court life. They were its bloodstream. Versailles thrived on erotic performance, on carefully coded desire, and on the idea that your body could be your resume if you knew how to wield it. And people did wield it, ruthlessly. One baroness reportedly trained her daughters in the art of the lingering compliment, sending them into the queen's circle like glittering grenades. Another noblewoman kept a detailed chart of the queen's emotional states and timed her flirtations to match Marie's moods, like emotional astrology. And somewhere in this room, a young cavalier is performing his entire family's comeback by locking eyes with a duchess twice his age and whispering something about Italian poetry. It's all very subtle until it isn't, because once the masks slip, usually around the third glass of Tokaji, you start to see the real exchanges. Not just glances, but letters. Not just smiles, but alliances. Someone is offering to leak a diplomatic letter in exchange for a night alone. Someone else is offering to cover gambling debts if the queen favors their cousin's promotion. The entire room is a tapestry of unspoken deals, stitched with desire and desperation. Historians still argue whether Marie was orchestrating this or simply trapped inside it. Did she allow the flirtations to keep the court distracted? Did she indulge them out of boredom? Or was she just trying to survive in a system that demanded she be both virgin and Venus, monarch and muse, Madonna and Moll? What's certain is that she had her favorites. The Comtesse de Polignac, for one, was not just a friend but a power broker, whose access to the queen translated into appointments, lands, and rumors thick enough to choke a peasant. Their relationship, romantic or not, is beside the point. In Versailles, perception was reality, and every whispered suggestion of intimacy added another layer to the legend. The queen was accused of everything from lesbian affairs to orgiastic feasts, and while most of it was slander, none of it was accidental. These stories weren't born in taverns, they were conceived right here, in the velvet corners of the queen's bedroom, where flirtation was sport and secrets were foreplay. According to Sex with Kings, some of the most notorious power plays came in the form of bedroom games, polite euphemisms for activities that blurred the line between court ritual and courtship. One of the more infamous involved a duke who, after losing favor with the king, attempted to woo his way back via the queen's lady-in-waiting. He sent her a love letter scented with rose oil and veiled threats, suggesting that her continued rejection might cost her father his naval post. She read it aloud at supper. The duke was exiled within the week. Marie didn't even raise her voice, just tapped her fingernail against her wine glass and said, "How curious." In a room full of performance, silence was the ultimate mic drop. And then there are the fringe characters, the oddballs who made this world even more bizarre. Like the man who claimed a divine court intrigue from the arrangement of hairpins in the queen's discarded coiffure. He was never officially recognized, but somehow always showed up with uncannily accurate predictions. Or the woman who insisted she could read loyalty in the folds of silk petticoats and was paid handsomely to whisper her readings during costume fittings. Were they mad? Maybe. But in a place where affection could mean appointment and scandal could mean scaffolds, you'd be mad not to try everything. So you stand there, awash in perfume and pretense, watching as smiles bloom into strategies. Room pulses not with lust, necessarily, but with that charged electricity that happens when everyone is pretending not to want what they obviously want. The queen closes her eyes for a moment. Whether in exhaustion or calculation, you can't tell, but you feel it. This isn't just a meeting room anymore. It's a theater, a trap, and a tinderbox. And tonight, it smells like someone's about to strike a match. The queen's bedroom is quiet now, but not peaceful. Still, heavy curtains dampen the sunlight, and the whole room feels like it's holding its breath. You blink and realize some things. Off there are two beds. Well, technically, there's the bed. Majestic, canopied, sacred. That's the queen's public bed, the one you've seen in paintings, draped in embroidered silk, perched like a throne on a platform. But then there's the other bed. Smaller, plainer, tucked deeper into the private quarters. And if you understand this difference, you understand the monarchy. Because in Versailles, not all beds are created equal. One is ceremonial. The other is real. One is for power, the other sometimes for sex. And the king didn't always sleep in, either. You're not alone in thinking this sounds ridiculous. Why would a royal couple need two beds? Why stage an entire theater performance just to tuck someone in? But this wasn't about sleep. The queen's public bed was where she gave birth, held court, and received dignitaries in nightgowns worth more than your house. It was the visual symbol of royal fertility and political control. The act of the king visiting her bed wasn't romantic, it was constitutional. A physical proof of alliance between crown and womb. And so, if the king came to her chamber at night, he didn't sneak in. He marched in full view of guards, footmen, and various nosy nobles, like some weirdly perfumed parade. He knocked, entered, and did his duty. Or at least he was supposed to. And here lies the problem. Louis XVI was not particularly fast, or slow, or anything, really. For 7 long years, their marriage remained unconsummated. The French people, naturally, became obsessed. Caricatures were printed showing the queen blowing out candles, bored, while the king fiddled with the lock. Pamphlets accused her of everything from sorcery to adultery with Swedish bodyguards. All because the royal bed stayed politically cold. Historians still argue whether Louis had a medical condition, possibly phimosis, or simply lacked confidence. What's more interesting is that for 7 years, the most powerful couple in France couldn't perform the one act Versailles required, producing a dauphin. And every empty night in that bed chipped away at Marie's legitimacy. She could wear diamonds, but without a son. She was just another Austrian girl playing dress-up. Eventually, the pressure exploded. After a private consultation with his brother-in-law, the Emperor of Austria, Louis finally figured it out or got surgery, depending on who you ask. And 9 months later, voila, a dauphin. France exhaled. Marie's status climbed, but the damage had been done. Her bedroom had been the national punchline for nearly a decade. And even with a baby in her arms, people whispered. That baby looked a bit too Nordic, didn't he? Had the Swedish count been visiting her private bed after all? According to Sex with Kings, royal bedrooms were rarely places of intimacy. More like arenas where political expectations clashed with awkward bodies. Courtiers would actually witness royal births in that bed to ensure the child was legitimate. Imagine giving birth while 50 people crowd around your legs, scribbling notes. Marie once fainted during childbirth, and they still didn't clear the room. Privacy was treason. And her bedroom, for all its opulence, was a prison lined in taffeta. Still, it wasn't without pleasure. Sometimes in those rare in-between hours when no one needed a garter adjusted or a treaty smuggled under a teacup, the Queen used the space for things that felt real. She'd read sentimental novels, sneak forbidden champagne, or write absurdly theatrical letters to her best friend Madame de Polignac. The tone of these letters? Sometimes breathlessly romantic. Enough to fuel rumors that their bond went far beyond friendship. Did they? The jury's still out. But whether love or strategy, that relationship gave the Queen her one unshakable ally in a world that traded affection like currency. And then there's the strange. Like the ritual where the bed linens were fluffed with herbs meant to protect fertility, a mix of thyme, rue, and crushed amethyst, prescribed by a court mystic with questionable hygiene. Or the one time a jester smuggled a goose into the Queen's private bedchamber as a joke, only for it to trigger a full security lockdown and a temporary goose ban at Versailles. Power and absurdity slept side by side, quite literally. You walk back from the second bed to the first, wondering how a room can be both sanctuary and stage, both womb and war room. But that's the paradox of monarchy, especially here. The place where you laid your head became the place where people laid their hopes, their schemes, and sometimes their naked ambition. And tonight, you start to realize the Queen's greatest skill wasn't political finesse or fashion innovation. It was surviving in a place where love, legitimacy, and loyalty all depended on which bed you were expected to use, and which one you actually did. You catch a whiff of something strange as you cross the bedroom, threshold again warm milk laced, with honey, a hint of lavender, and something chalky, not unpleasant, but definitely unnatural, and then you see it. A gleaming porcelain tub surrounded by curtains, flanked by two attendants holding towels like weapons. The Queen is taking her famous milk bath, not for hygiene, for magic. At least, that's what the whispers say. Because in a court obsessed with youth, fertility, and the illusion of divine skin, Marie Antoinette's bath wasn't just self-care, it was strategy, and it wasn't just milk. Depending on the day, it was said to be laced with almond oil, powdered pearls, and on particularly tense mornings, even a drop or two of bull's blood. You blink. Did she really bathe in blood? Probably not. But in Versailles, truth rarely outpaced rumor, and if the bath helped her skin glow or her enemies shudder, she wasn't about to correct anyone. The milk bath was only part of the toilette ritual, which, if you haven't realized yet, was less about getting ready and more about performing readiness. Every pot of cream, every dab of rouge, every dab of pomade was a political statement, and there were dozens of products involved. The Queen's morning table looked less like a vanity and more like an alchemist's lab jars filled with crushed seashells, syrups distilled from poppies, lotions scented with musk and powdered iris. Some were from her personal perfumer, Jean-Louis Fargen, who concocted exclusive scents that cost more than a servant's annual wages. Others were gifts from foreign diplomats, coded bribes disguised as skincare. She once received a tiny vial from Venice said to contain distilled moonlight. It smelled like regret and lemon peel. She used it twice, then passed it to a rival who developed a rash. Historians still argue whether Marie was genuinely obsessed with beauty or simply playing the part assigned to her. After all, her body had become national infrastructure. It was expected to glow, to charm, to produce sons and spin narratives. Any wrinkle could be read as weakness, any blemish, a political liability. So her toilette became a kind of armor. And the milk bath? Her morning baptism into a role she couldn't escape. But not everyone viewed it as benign. Some factions at court believed these rituals bordered on the occult. A few whispered that the Queen's obsession with milky skin and powdered purity was a sign of Austrian witchcraft. One pamphlet even accused her of grinding up crushed bones to preserve her youth. Another insisted she'd stolen a fertility charm from a nun's corpse. None of it was true. But in a bedroom thick with paranoia and incense, it didn't have to be. And then came the cosmetic conspiracies. According to the erotic spirit through history, court life was so competitive. Rivals allegedly tampered with each other's makeup. There's a recorded incident where a noblewoman collapsed mid-dance because her face, powder borrowed from a supposed friend, contained trace amounts of lead. The queen, learning of it, quietly had her own jars tested and replaced. Number. Confrontation. Just a new rule, no shared beauty products. And yet, this paranoia extended even further. Her night creams were sealed with wax and stored in locked cabinets. Her bathwater was guarded. Once, when a servant was caught refilling her perfume flask without permission, he was dismissed and publicly humiliated. Versailles didn't do privacy. But when it came to beauty, it did control that, and if you think this was all about looks, think again. Her toilette was also a political battlefield, a stage where factions performed their loyalty or attempted sabotage. Who got to hand her the rosewater cloth? Who was allowed to offer her the perfumed gloves? These small gestures meant everything. In one infamous episode, the Duchesse de Guiche tried to pass the queen a jar of rouge before her rival could do so. The queen hesitated, then accepted it. What followed was a 3-month silent war of pamphlets, poisoned poetry, and one suspiciously timed feigning spell at a garden party. It all began with blush. Because Versailles politics were microscopic. If you couldn't win in Parliament, you won by holding the comb still. Amid all this fragrant chaos, Marie Antoinette did something strange. She built a fake village. Not a metaphorical one. A literal hamlet, nestled behind the palace, where she dressed in peasant gowns and played milkmaid. She carried baskets, petted goats, even tried to make butter. It was her escape from the suffocating rituals of her bedroom. But to many, it looked like mockery. While the country starved, the queen played dairymaid in silk. Even her relaxation became political poison. And yet, some scholars suggest the hamlet was her way of reclaiming control over her image, creating a softer pastoral version of herself. To counter the cold, overpainted myth constructed in her bedroom. But it was too late. The bedroom had become legend. And legends don't wash off, even with warm milk and scented oils. You stand there now, watching the queen emerge from her bath, wrapped in embroidered linen, smiling that practiced smile. The one that says everything is fine. The one that hides everything else. And you realize her toilette wasn't just for her. It was for everyone watching. A daily illusion. A soft ritual wrapped around hard survival. And as the bathwater drains, it takes nothing with it. Not the pressure, not the danger, not the suspicion steeped in every petal and potion. It starts with a cough. Or maybe it's the way she pauses before sitting down. Her hand lingers at her waist, then slips across the curve of her belly. Someone notices. Someone always notices. Because when you're the queen and your entire body is France's investment portfolio, every stomach cramp is a potential state emergency. And this time, it's real. Whispers ripple through the gilded hallways, rush down the staircase, slip under tapestries like mice. Marie Antoinette is pregnant. Again. And suddenly, the queen's bedroom becomes less of a powdery social stage and more of a surgical theater crossed with a national shrine. You watch the transformation in real time. Velvet cushions multiply. Chairs vanish to make space for midwives. Screens are erected. Prayers whispered. Rivalries reawakened. Because each royal pregnancy was more than biology. It was prophecy. It was spectacle. It was war. Everyone wants in. Everyone wants credit. Because proximity to the queen's belly equals influence, and influence means pensions, property, and precedence. So the politics don't pause, they accelerate. Court factions calculate odds like gamblers watching a roulette wheel. Will it be a boy? Will he survive? Who will be godparents? Who gets to carry the cradle? Even the wet nurse is a coveted role. Not because it's noble, but because it guarantees access, and access is everything. But don't get too excited. You can be replaced in a heartbeat. One misstep, one fainting spell, one whisper to the wrong lady in waiting, and your future vanishes like a puff of bergamot-scented air. Historians still argue whether the Queen ever had real agency over her pregnancies. In theory, this was her private experience. In practice, it belonged to everyone else. The court dictated her diet, her daily routines, even her thoughts. She was expected to glow, not sweat, to produce healthy sons on demand, ideally while smiling. Through 14 hours of mandatory etiquette, each pregnancy was monitored with the intensity of a royal investigation. Her vomit was analyzed, her cravings were recorded. When she asked for strawberries in February, 4 greenhouses were mobilized. When she slept too long, pamphlets claimed she was dying. And if she looked tired, they accused her of faking it to avoid her duties. Imagine growing a human inside you while your entire country accuses you of laziness, treason, and sorcery before breakfast. And then comes the bedroom drama. Because giving birth in Versailles was a public event. Not metaphorically, literally. When labor began, dozens of nobles were summoned to witness the miracle, as if their presence somehow blessed the process. It was meant to prevent rumors of switched babies or illegitimate heirs. In reality, it turned childbirth into performance art. The Queen's bed, her ceremonial bed, was turned into a stage, surrounded by spectators who were more interested in lineage than comfort. There's a chilling account of Marie nearly dying from suffocation during labor because the room was too crowded and no one dared open a window. The baby survived, barely, but the memory lingered. Sex with kings offers one especially jarring anecdote. When Marie delivered her first son, a noble fainted mid-birth and had to be dragged out by his powdered wig. Not because of blood, but because the future of France had finally arrived, and he wasn't ready for it. The room was too hot, too loud, too desperate. And the Queen? She barely had time to hold her newborn before it was whisked away, measured, confirmed, announced. Only then could she cry. Not from joy, but from sheer exhaustion. But the pressure didn't end there. Every heir was expected to embody strength, legitimacy, continuity. If the baby sneezed, the newspapers panicked. If he didn't smile at the Archbishop, heretics were blamed. And through it all, the Queen remained pinned in her brocade cocoon, forced to recover in a space that had already moved on. Her bedroom filled again with courtiers, politics, and daily ceremonies as if nothing had happened. No time for postpartum anything, no time for silence. Just lace, laughter, and the occasional political death threat delivered in verse. And speaking of threats, each pregnancy also drew out the poison pens. The underground press erupted with satire. They mocked her fertility, suggested illegitimacy, hinted that she conceived by candlelight with her hairdresser. Some accused her of using aphrodisiacs. Others claimed she faked labor entirely. A particularly cruel pamphlet depicted her giving birth to a poodle in a powdered wig. These weren't just jokes. They were psychological warfare. And the Queen? She endured it all with powdered calm. But her letters to Polignac turned darker, shorter. Her jokes got sharper, her eyes less wide. And then there were the children, the few that survived. They didn't live here long. After birth, they were taken from her and raised in their own wing, surrounded by tutors and expectations too heavy for their tiny shoulders. The Queen would visit, of course, but the message was clear. Even her own offspring belonged more to the state than to her. Her bedroom, once a chamber of hope, became a reminder of separation, of loss. You stand now at the edge of the bed, imagining the weight of that expectation, not just to reproduce, but to succeed at it with poise and perfection, under chandeliers and scrutiny. And as another courtier enters the room to deliver yet another congratulatory bouquet laced with ulterior motives, you wonder how anyone managed to stay sane here. Or sleep. It begins with a footstool. Not a war, not a scandal, not a declaration, just a stupid gilded footstool. You blink, thinking surely no one's going to fight over that. But then you see it. The slow turn of heads, the tightening of smiles, the way a duchess's hand stiffens on the edge of her skirt. Because in Marie Antoinette's bedroom, the footstool isn't just furniture. It's hierarchy carved into wood. And who gets to kneel beside the queen and hand her a slipper, or place the cushion beneath her feet, is a question worth destroying your career over. This is where the court's real battles were fought, not in the council chambers, but at the hem of a silk dress. And today, someone's about to lose everything for standing one lace-trimmed inch too far forward. The queen is sitting upright, a vision of poise wrapped in blue taffeta, her face an unreadable canvas of powdered serenity. Around her, the room buzzes like a beehive that's just been tapped. The Duchesse de Nully, mistress of the robes and unofficial etiquette tyrant, has just given a pointed look to the Marquise de Montesson, who dares to reach toward the footstool before her superior. Gasps, sharp as needlepoints, ripple through the onlookers. A mistake has been made. And like blood in the Versailles water, it's drawn the sharks. The queen? She doesn't blink. She lets the silence bloom, just long enough for everyone to feel it. Then she smiles faintly and shifts her gaze to the mirror. Crisis averted. Technically. But tomorrow, that Marquise's husband may find his military commission mysteriously delayed, and her invitations to the Queen's evenings might suddenly stop arriving. That's how it works here. No open conflict. Just subtle executions by absence. Historians still argue whether Marie enjoyed these little rituals or merely tolerated them. Some say she wielded etiquette like a blade-letting, others believe they were winning battles while she maneuvered behind the scenes. Others suggest she was trapped in the same ridiculous system, rolling her eyes internally while nodding gracefully in real life. What's clear is that these rules weren't optional. In Versailles, etiquette was law. If you reached for the wrong bowl of potpourri or bowed at the wrong moment, you weren't just rude, you were politically dangerous. Everything in the Queen's bedroom, from the placement of candles to the order of entry, was orchestrated. Like opera and footstools, they were Act 1 of many social suicides. You think that sounds exhausting? Welcome to the club. Even nobles trained from birth to navigate this minefield cracked under the pressure. There's a story from Sex with Kings about a young countess who practiced curtsying for 6 hours, straight because she'd been selected to hand the queen a pair of gloves. She twisted her ankle in the act, limped during the presentation, and was subsequently mocked in a dozen underground cartoons. Her reputation never recovered. Why? Because in a world where your worth is measured by how elegantly you offer a glove, a limp is treason. And then there's the comedy. The accidental, infuriatingly human moments that pierced the artificial perfection. One morning, a spaniel belonging to a noblewoman mistook the Queen's footstool for its bed and refused to move. The room froze. The Duchess tried to coax it away. The Queen, with deadly softness, simply said, "Perhaps it knows its place better than we do." No one laughed. Not then. But the dog got an honorary nickname, Monsieur le Maréchal, and its owner was sent to the countryside for health. The court had no mercy for mistakes, but it loved poetic justice. Fringe tidbit of the day. There was once a brief, weird trend where courtiers began designing custom calling cards, scented with personal perfumes and embossed with their preferred slipper rank, essentially their ideal role during the Queen's toilette. Imagine handing someone a rose-scented card that read, "Holder of the Royal Scarf Winter Season." Desperate? Absolutely. But in Versailles, branding was everything. All this obsessive etiquette wasn't just snobbery, it was survival. Every movement in the Queen's bedroom was a signal. and misreading it could cost your family generations of status. That's why people rehearsed their smiles in the mirror, studied the queen's moods like weather reports, and mapped the floor plan of her bedchamber like generals planning invasion routes. Did she place her hand on the armrest? That might mean she wants to rise. Did she glance at the window? That could be code for adjusting the light. There's a documented case of 3 ladies in waiting, physically colliding while trying to interpret the queen's eyebrow lift. One ended up with a broken pearl comb. The queen said nothing. But the next morning, only 2 returned. You start to understand why the air in here always feels tight, like it's been filtered through 10 layers of corset stays and nervous perfume. It's not just the people, it's the pressure of being perfect in public while pretending it's all effortless. Marie Antoinette bore that weight in embroidered silence. But behind closed doors, she vented in letters full of biting wit, sometimes mocking the rituals she herself had to uphold. She once joked to her brother that the only thing more dangerous than war was trying to figure out which handkerchief to accept in front of a duchess. And she wasn't wrong. As you back slowly away from the footstool, watching another lady take her chance, this time with better timing, you realize the bedroom is not peaceful. It's a trap disguised as routine. A beautiful, bone-crushing game of manners. And the queen? She's the only one who understands all the rules, even the ones she'll never say out loud. You hear it before you see its soft heels echoing on polished parquet, a creak in the floorboard where no one should be standing. You're not alone. Again. But this time, it isn't a lady in waiting or some silk-clad baron angling for inheritance. This is someone who isn't supposed to be here. And they're already deep inside the queen's bedroom. Welcome to the final years of Versailles, when the whispers grow louder than the music, and the people slipping through secret passageways are no longer lovers or laundresses. They're spies, revolutionaries, disguised pamphleteers. And sometimes, their weapons are words sharper than any blade. The Queen's Chamber, once a stage for ceremonial fluff and flirtations, has become a contested territory where information is smuggled in the folds of nightgowns and rebellion wears rouge. Walls aren't just listening, they're leaking. Beneath the tapestries and behind the mirrors, the Queen's most private space has become a security nightmare. Her enemies know it, her allies deny it, and Marie, she senses it. That old, unblinking sense that someone's always watching is no longer courtly paranoia. It's real. People she's never met know what color gown she wore at supper. They know what she ate, what she didn't. They know which lady-in-waiting has been dismissed and which footman has vanished. Information that should stay within this room now spreads like mold across the country. The Queen's bedroom, once sealed off by etiquette and intimidation, has been cracked open. And what spills out is ugly. It didn't happen overnight. It began with the pamphlets. Satirical, venomous, disturbingly well-informed. They described her bed, her habits, her alleged lovers, her spending, her scent. One even claimed she stored secret letters from Austria beneath her mattress, implying treason wrapped in Egyptian cotton. Historians still argue whether these publications were coordinated political tools or spontaneous bile from a furious public. But one thing's certain: they were disturbingly accurate in their floor plans. Someone inside was talking. And not just for coin. For cause. According to Sex with Kings, the Queen's bedroom in its final years was infiltrated more than any other royal chamber in modern European history. Former servants were bribed. Disgruntled nobles aligned with radical philosophers. Even some ladies of the bedchamber began secretly passing on observations: who visited when, what was said, what wasn't. And in the shadows, men and women who had once jostled for ribbon privileges now traded secrets like currency. Not for favor, but for survival. It's easy to imagine one such moment. A quiet evening, the Queen reclining on her chaise, a close friend massaging her temples, candlelight dancing across gilded moldings. They speak softly, assuming privacy. But down the corridor, a mirror cracks open just slightly, and someone scribbles their words into a ledger. Later that week, those same words appear in a pamphlet read by angry citizens in Paris, fanned across the cobblestones like poisoned petals. Versailles is no longer a palace. It's a megaphone, and the Queen, her defenses harden. Her bedroom becomes more private than ever. Fewer visitors, shorter toilettes. The famous sociability begins to retract. She builds emotional walls where silk ones once sufficed, but it's too late. The myth is loose. No longer angelic, no longer maternal, no longer charming. Now she's L'Autrichienne, the foreigner queen, the she-wolf, the harlot. They call her Madame Deficit and accuse her of feasting while the nation starves. They imagine her boudoir as a den of excess, full of perfumes, lovers, and foreign plots. The truth doesn't matter, because the legend crafted from years of watching, whispering, and weaponizing her bedroom has replaced her. One especially haunting anecdote. A small painting of the Queen, stolen from her room and defaced with human excrement, was found nailed to a market wall in Paris. Not just vandalism, a message. Your chamber is no longer yours. We see you. And we're coming. Meanwhile, the Queen's attempts at privacy only feed the frenzy. Her quiet afternoons at Petit Trianon, her supposed escape, are interpreted as further withdrawal from the people. Her letters, meant for friends, are intercepted and reinterpreted as coded treason. Even her silences are damning. A pause in conversation becomes a conspiracy. A sigh is revolution. And the bedroom? It remains deceptively beautiful. The gold hasn't faded. The curtains still shimmer. But the atmosphere has shifted. The softness is weaponized. Every object becomes suspect. That perfume vial, does it contain a sedative? That drawer, are those letters encrypted? Her bed is no longer a sanctuary, it's an exhibit. And every visitor, whether friend or foe, walks through it with the knowledge that they're stepping on the battlefield of a dying monarchy. You stand by the window, looking out at the manicured gardens. But even they feel off, too perfect, too composed, like a mask stretched too tightly. Behind you, the Queen speaks softly, unaware that her words may already be on their way to someone who wants her dead. And for the first time, you truly feel it. The danger isn't coming. It's already here. It's wearing lace. It's sipping tea. It's folding linens and whispering your name with a smile. Because the most dangerous room in France isn't filled with soldiers or swords. It's filled with mirrors. And none of them are honest anymore. And now you leave the palace. Or rather, the Queen does, and you're following. Whether you want to or not, the air changes. It smells less of rosewater and more of grass, fresh linen, and something quieter, maybe hope, maybe denial. You've arrived at the Petit Trianon, Marie Antoinette's private retreat. But don't let the name fool you. This isn't a cottage. This is Versailles, miniaturized and romanticized, built for a queen desperate to breathe. A place where there are no courtiers fighting over footstools, no powdered mobs in her bedroom at dawn. Here, she picks wildflowers. She plays the harpsichord. She walks in the English gardens wearing a white muslin dress that Paris will later accuse her of using to insult French silk makers. Even escape, in her world, is dangerous. The Petit Trianon was supposed to be freedom. Given to her by Louis XVI as a private gift, it came with an unspoken promise. Here, she could exist as a woman, not a symbol. No rituals, no spectators. Just a house, a garden, and the illusion of choice. But illusions don't last long when the rest of France is burning. Because while Marie was planting roses and writing melancholy letters to her friends, the people outside the palace gates were sharpening their pitchforks and running out of bread. The Queen's bedroom may have changed location, but it hadn't changed purpose. Even at the Trianon, her chamber remained a stage, and her every movement, even in solitude, was recorded, reinterpreted, and reloaded as ammunition against her. Historians still argue whether she truly believed this retreat could protect her. Some think it was naive escapism, a teenager's fantasy stretched into adulthood. Others believe it was strategic, a way to project softness, to humanize herself before the revolution reached her doorstep. Either way, it didn't work. The Queen's imagined privacy became the revolution's most vivid scandal. The hamlet behind the Trianon, built to resemble a peasant village, was interpreted not as charm, but as mockery. The bedroom she designed, herself simple, light, unadorned, was painted by pamphleteers as a boudoir of hedonism, a pleasure cave where Austria whispered treason into France's ears. Even her sleep became suspect. What kind of woman, one revolutionary pamphlet asked, can sleep in such luxury while mothers weep over empty cradles? And still, she tried. She hosted small gatherings here. Intimate, quiet evenings with music, poetry, sometimes just silence. No robes à la Francaise, no ridiculous wigs shaped like ships. Just cotton gowns and barefoot strolls. But even these moments, stripped of protocol, were surveilled. One of her former confidants once noted in a letter how eerie it felt to see guards stationed in the garden, watching the windows of the Queen's room as she played cards with friends. "We were alone," she wrote, "but not unobserved. There's a particularly strange account, half-truth, half-folklore about a woman who posed as a laundress to get inside the petty Trianon. She slipped into the Queen's bedroom while it was empty, opened drawers, ran her hands across the bedsheets, then left without taking a thing. When arrested, she said she only wanted to see how it felt to be near the woman who had ruined France. The idea that being near the Queen's bed could be an act of protest says everything. Her chamber was no longer just a private space. It had become a proxy for the entire regime, and yes, sex still lingered in the air. Accusations of affairs continued, now more desperate than believable. Rumors that she met foreign spies in her bed at the Trianon, that she summoned lovers by candlelight, that she had coded betting patterns that indicated who was invited and when. Most of it was fantasy, dripping with resentment and powdered misogyny. But it spread like perfume in the wing, sweet, sticky, impossible to ignore. By the time the revolution reached Versailles, the Queen's bedroom, both in the main palace and at the petty Trianon, had already been dismantled in the public imagination. It no longer mattered what she actually did. Her bed, her gowns, her windows, even the direction she turned her head during conversations, these were all interpreted as sins. Her chambers had become confessionals in reverse. Instead of absolution, they handed her guilt. And when the mob finally arrived, when the doors were broken down and the royal family was dragged into history's unforgiving light, it was not the throne that the people wanted to see. It was the bedroom, the rumors, the furniture, the sheets, the hidden doors. They rushed in not to govern, but to gawk, to confirm that this woman really had lived in silk while they starved, to see for themselves the myth they had hated for so long. And in that moment, the most dangerous room in France became its most violated. You're standing in that room now, quiet, empty. The curtains still flutter, though the windows are shut. Dust clings to the corners. The bed is stripped, the perfume bottles long gone, but the weight lingers. You feel it in your lungs, not the glamour, not the scandal, just the unbearable heaviness of visibility, of living your life in a glass box while the world sharpens its knives. And now slowly, the candles burn lower, the walls no longer whisper. The room exhales. The Queen is gone. But her bedroom remains not just in wood and stone, but in memory, a gilded witness to how desire, expectation, and politics can all be folded into a single pillowcase. End of script. Sweet dreams.